how that picture came to be. And they kept the same picture, which I thought was wonderful that they did that. And it was funny. I would hold the book in my hands, and I said, that's my baby. That's my baby. It's taken on another form now. But what was supposed to have been an hour lecture, because remember, I haven't had any rest. It's very hard to rest on these long flights at very crowded airplanes. I hadn't had any rest, and I figured, well, I'll do the hour lecture and the book signing, then I can go back to the hotel. Didn't turn out like that. It ended up being over 2 hours, everybody asking questions. And when I go to countries like that, we always have a translator. And this translator was one that was with us when we were there last May. She's a beautiful young girl who is very wonderful and easy to get along with, and her English is impeccable. And I need someone like that. And she understands metaphysics, so she can translate for me. And she was the one, they said, do you want the same translator? And I said, yes, because Julia had been wonderful when I was there in May. So they had the same girl come again. And when we're over there in Moscow, they have our own driver that picks us up and takes us anywhere we want to go. And our translator is with us at all times. But finally, I got out of there. I got some sleep. Then started 2 days of nonstop magazine interviews. They had set up for publicity. These were big magazines. They were the Russian editions of Cosmopolitan and what's the other one? ELLE. They were big magazines they have over here, but these were the Russian branches of those magazines. And we had 2 days set up where I was going to be interviewed by one after the other reporters all day for 2 days. In the beginning, I said, it'd be a whole lot easier if we had all of them come at one time and have like a press conference and just let them all ask questions and we get it over with all at once. They said, no, the magazines don't want to do that. Each one wants to tell their story and their article in their own way. They have their own questions they want to ask. So we have to do one after the other. That gets a little tiring when they're all asking pretty much the same questions, but they want to write it from their own slant. By this time, my friend was tired of the trip, tired of all the things we were doing, even though we weren't even halfway finished. So when I was going for the magazine interview, she said, do you need me today? And I said, well, not really. We're not going to be selling any books. There's nothing for you to do. She wanted to stay back at the hotel. And she said, I'm tired. So she stayed in the hotel and slept. And I said, you're tired. I'm the one that's doing all the work. But anyway, for 2 days, it was nonstop publicity. And then I had to do some talks, and these were open to the public, and we talked about the new books and lectured on those. Well, all during the magazine interviews, too, my little trusty translator was there, and she was just wonderful. I couldn't have done anything without her. But then what I was really worried about was I was going to give a class in Russia. Now, I've given classes in many foreign countries, but this one I knew I was going to have to do it with a translator because they don't speak English, only very few. And I only had about 2 in the class that could speak English. I knew it was going to have to be with a translator, so I worried about that. The whole time we set up the trip and going over there, I was thinking, how am I going to be able to do this? Because it would take longer with the translator. But the main thing is, on the last day of my class, I give a demonstration of how the technique works. I said, how are we going to do this with a translator? Because the translator can't be translating while I'm doing a hypnosis session. So it was going to be tricky, and I wasn't sure how it was going to work out. Now, when I was over there in May, I met with this one man he's a doctor over there. It's Dr. Yakov Galperin. And he is forming an organization that's going to be worldwide, where he is trying to unite all of the alternative healers and practitioners in the world, and is turning into quite an ambitious project. He wants to have the names and to make a worldwide organization of all of the herbalists, the naturalists, homeopaths, naturopaths, anybody working in alternative healing. And he spoke to me last May. He wanted to know if I could help him to get this going in the United States. So when I was there this time, I also had to have a meeting with him as we discussed this some more. And he arranged for several of his friends who were doctors and psychiatrists to take my class, because he said they wanted to start using this method in Moscow and in Russia. So we had the class with the translator, and this is the first time we had more men than we have women. Usually it's the other way around in any metaphysical things I go to. But there were psychiatrists and doctors present, and I did the best I could with the translator, and I had handouts that had been translated, hoping they would be able to understand. And we decided to go ahead and do the demonstration, and I used my translator as the subject because I knew she could understand English. The doctors filmed the session, and they were going to have it translated so they would be able to understand it. And I had my class for 3 days with them, but this was one of the hardest ones I've done. It turned out fine, but then Dr. Galperin told me afterwards what he wanted to do was either I come back to Moscow and work with these doctors later to make sure they are doing it correctly, or they could come to America and work with me here, just to make sure they're doing it correctly. So I guess I'm going to be having a lot more dealings with Russia. But the people there are wonderful, and they've always treated me very nicely when I've been there, and I've had no problem. The only problem is getting the visa to get in there in the first place. Once you do that, you're fine. So anyway, by the time we left Moscow, we had been 3 weeks, and we were getting a little tired because it was one thing after the other. I hadn't had a day off. So then we had to go to London, and I had many lectures scheduled in London. I also had some time off. So knowing that my friend had never been to Europe, I wanted to schedule some things for her in London that she would never get to see otherwise. So on the 2 days we had off, we scheduled some sightseeing so she'd be able to see these things. And the one was a half-a-day one where we just went around London, and she got to see all of the buildings and the things there. But I really wanted her to see the Tower of London, to see the crown jewels. And if you've never done it, it is really something to see, because these are, they said, the most valuable in the world. They can't even insure them because they are worth so much. The largest diamonds in the world are in the crown and in the scepter. It's amazing to see the jewels. It was cold in London, too, but we didn't have to do so much walking around, just outside in the Tower of London. So we went to several things that she could see. One of them was the boat trip down the Thames, the River Thames, that led us out right at the Tower of London. If you ever get a chance to go to these places, you need to see these things. Last year, when I was in Moscow, I wanted to see the Red Square, and I was able to do that. This time, I let them take my friend because I'd already seen it. So I'm getting to see all the things all around the world that I always wanted to go to. in addition to lecturing and spreading my work, I am seeing some things. But then on the next day, we had an entire day. So we scheduled a bus trip that was going to go out of London. And it went to Windsor Castle, where the Queen stays mostly on the weekends. She stays at the Buckingham Palace in London during the week, and then she goes out to Windsor Castle. And they have tours of Windsor Castle. And the opulence is beyond belief. You cannot really comprehend the wealth in that castle, that how anyone could even live in it. It is just so much. There's just, it's just hard to describe. The furnishings, the paintings, everything is extreme wealth, and it is just very, very beautiful. That's the first time I had seen that. I hadn't got to take that tour. But then from there, we went out to Stonehenge, and she wanted to see that. And she got very excited, my friend did, as we came in on the bus. If you've been to Stonehenge, it sits on a plain that is just wide open. I mean, there's no houses, there's nothing. It just sits out in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of this huge open plain, a field. It's not even a field, it's just an open plain. And we could see it from a distance, and she got very excited. She said this meant more to her than seeing the Taj Mahal. But see it from a distance, she got very excited, and she said, I feel like I'm coming home, which might mean that she'd had past lives there before. I don't know. But we spent that hours walking around the circle with the rocks, because they won't let you inside of it. But it is quite a spiritual feeling, even though I've been there several times, to be there. It's a strange feeling, a feeling of ethereal calmness as you walk around that area. Almost like there is something sacred or metaphysical or special or spiritual about that area. But the wind was blowing so hard, and it was so cold out there. But we did get to see that, and then we went from there to Bath. And I've been through Bath, but I had never seen the museums there. And this tour was the Romans, way back during the Romans' days, had a city there, the city of Bath, which they had found hot water springs underneath the ground. And so they built these huge bathhouses there. And this is where, hundreds and hundreds of years later, the city of Bath has now come from. And the hot springs are still there. So when the explorers, the archaeologists, excavated, they found the ruins of the bathhouses and the springs, and they built this museum all around it. So it was really good to see that. And I love museums, and I like archaeological things anyway. So that was really interesting to see that in the city of Bath. So there's many, many things